was sitting in Dr. Patterson's examination room on a Tuesday morning in March when my son Michael walked in with his wife Denise, and before I could even ask why they were there, Denise looked at the doctor and said, "We need to talk about memory care facilities. She can't live alone anymore." I felt my whole body go cold. Dr. Patterson glanced at me with what I can only describe as pity, and that's when I knew something terrible had been happening behind my back. My name is Anne, and I'm 73 years old. I've lived in the same house in Birmingham, Alabama for 42 years, the house my late husband Robert and I bought when Michael was just 5 years old. Robert passed 11 years ago from a heart attack, sudden and cruel, and I've been managing just fine on my own ever since. I raised 3 children in that house. I cooked thousands of meals in that kitchen. I planted the magnolia tree in the front yard that now shades half the porch. That house isn't just where I live, it's who I am. And on that March morning, I realized my own daughter-in-law had been plotting to take it all away from me. Let me go back to help you understand how I got to that doctor's office, how a woman who had always been so careful, so loving, so giving, ended up sitting there like a defendant in her own life. I married Robert when I was 21 years old. He was a mechanic, a good man with gentle hands and a laugh that could fill a room. We had Michael first, then 2 years later came my daughter Patricia, and 3 years after that, my youngest David. Robert worked long hours at the garage, and I worked nights as a nurse's aide at the hospital, and somehow we made it work. We never had much money, but we had love. We had Sunday dinners and birthday cakes and Christmas mornings with more laughter than presents. I remember Michael as a little boy, maybe 6 years old, coming into the kitchen one morning with his piggy bank. He'd counted out $3.47 in pennies and dimes, and he held it out to me with both hands. "Mama," he said, his face so serious, "you said the electric bill came and we need money. I saved this for a bike, but you can have it." I cried right there at the kitchen table. I scooped him up and told him to keep his bike money, that Mama and Daddy would figure it out. But he insisted on leaving $2 on the counter, just in case. That was my Michael. Thoughtful, protective, always worrying about taking care of his family. When Robert died, I thought I might die too. The grief was so heavy, I could barely breathe some days. But I had my children, and I had my grandchildren by then, and I kept going, because that's what you do. You keep going. Michael was always my serious child. Even as a teenager, he worried about bills and grades and the future. He became an accountant, married Denise when he was 28, and they had 2 children, my granddaughter Kayla and my grandson Brandon. I loved those babies like they were my own. I babysat them every weekend when they were small. I paid for Kayla's braces when Michael said they couldn't afford it. That was $2,000 I'd saved for a new roof, but I gave it to them anyway. I gave them $5,000 toward their down payment when they bought their first house. Patricia lived in Atlanta with her husband, a kind man who worked in IT. We talked on the phone every Sunday without fail. David was in the Army, stationed in Texas, and I didn't see him as much as I wanted, but we wrote letters and he called when he could. After Robert died, Michael started coming by every Sunday. At first, I was grateful. We'd have dinner, talk about the week, and he'd check little things around the house, change a light bulb, fix a loose hinge. It felt like love. It felt like a son taking care of his mother. But slowly, over the months and years, something shifted. Denise started coming with him, and she had opinions about everything. She thought my furniture was outdated. She thought I kept the house too warm. She thought I watched too much television. Small comments at first, easy to brush off. "Anne, don't you think this couch has seen better days? Anne, You really should update this kitchen. It's stuck in 1985. I'd smile and nod and change the subject. Then, about 2 years ago, Denise started asking about my finances. How much was my mortgage? Did I have savings? What about Robert's life insurance? Had I thought about what would happen to the house when I was gone? I should have seen it then. I should have recognized the hunger in her questions. But I thought she was just being practical. I thought she cared. I'm fine, honey, I told her. The house is paid off. I have my Social Security and Robert's pension. I'm managing just fine. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Of course you are. I just worry about you, that's all. But what I didn't know was that Denise had already started making phone calls that would nearly destroy my life. The first real sign came about 18 months ago. I had a regular checkup with Dr. Patterson, and when I arrived, his nurse asked me a strange question. Mrs. Williams, your daughter-in-law called last week. She mentioned you've been having some memory issues. I frowned. Memory issues? No, I haven't. The nurse smiled kindly, but I could see the doubt already forming. Well, she seemed concerned. She said you've been forgetting appointments and leaving the stove on. My heart started beating faster. I have never left the stove on in my life, and I've never missed an appointment with Dr. Patterson. The nurse made a note, but I could see she didn't quite believe me. That's the thing about being older. People are so quick to assume you're confused, that you're the problem. When Dr. Patterson came in, he was gentle but probing. Anne, how have you been feeling? Any confusion? Any trouble with daily tasks? I'm fine, I said firmly. I don't know why Denise would say those things, but they're not true. He nodded, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. He ran his usual tests, checked my blood pressure, asked me to remember 3 words and repeat them back 5 minutes later. I did it perfectly. He seemed satisfied, but the seed had been planted. Denise had started a file on me, a file of lies. Over the next several months, she kept calling Dr. Patterson's office. I didn't know this at the time. I only learned it later when I got copies of my medical records. She called to say I had gotten lost driving to the grocery store. She called to say I had forgotten to pay my electric bill. She called to say my neighbors were worried about me. None of it was true. I had never gotten lost. My bills were paid automatically from my checking account and had been for years. My neighbors, the Hendersons and the Washingtons, were dear friends who had Sunday coffee with me and never expressed any concern. But Denise was building a case that I was declining, that I was unsafe, that I needed help. What she didn't know was that I still had the mind of a woman who'd worked in hospitals for 30 years. I noticed everything, and soon I'd start keeping my own records. Meanwhile, Michael started visiting more often, always with Denise. They'd walk through my house like they were inspecting it, making comments about repairs that needed to be done, about how hard it must be for me to keep up with everything. "Mom, this bathroom tile is cracked," Michael would say. "You could trip." "Mom, these stairs are steep. What if you fall?" "Mom, this neighborhood isn't as safe as it used to be. We worry about you." I started to feel like a child being scolded, like my own home was being used as evidence against me. One Sunday in January, they brought up the idea of me moving in with them. "We have that extra bedroom," Denise said sweetly, her voice like honey over poison. "You could sell this big old house and we could take care of you. Wouldn't that be nice?" "I don't need taking care of," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I like my home. I'm staying here." Michael sighed, and for a moment I saw that little boy again, the one who'd offered me his bike money. But then his face hardened. Mom, be reasonable. You're not getting any younger. What if something happens and you're here all alone? Then I'll call 911 like anyone else would, I said. Denise's smile tightened. We're just trying to help, Anne. You don't have to be so stubborn. That word, stubborn. As if wanting to live in my own home, the home I'd worked for and loved for 4 decades, was some kind of character flaw. They left that day with tension thick in the air, and I sat in my living room feeling something I'd never felt around my own son before, fear. But what I didn't realize was that Denise wasn't just suggesting I move in with them. She was preparing for something much worse, something that would happen in just a few weeks. In February, Michael called and said he wanted to take me to my doctor's appointment. I told him I could drive myself. I'd been driving for 50 years without incident, but he insisted. He said he wanted to talk to Dr. Patterson about my overall health. I agreed because I had nothing to hide. I was healthy, I was sharp. I wanted Dr. Patterson to tell Michael that I was fine, so they'd stop hovering. That's how I ended up in that examination room on that Tuesday morning in March, with Michael and Denise walking in uninvited, and Denise announcing to my doctor that I needed memory care. Memory care. That's what they call nursing homes for people with dementia, people whose minds are slipping away. I knew what those places were like. I'd worked in one for 5 years as a young woman, changing sheets and feeding patients who didn't remember their own children. Dr. Patterson looked at me carefully. Anne, how do you feel about what Denise just said? I could barely speak. My throat felt like it was closing. I don't need memory care. I don't know what she's talking about. Denise leaned forward, her voice dripping with false concern. Anne, honey, we've talked about this. You've been forgetting things. You left the stove on twice last month. You got confused at the bank and couldn't remember your PIN. You called me at 2 in the morning thinking it was 2 in the afternoon. Every single word was a lie. I have never left the stove on, I said, my voice shaking. I have never forgotten my PIN. I have never called you in the middle of the night. Michael put his hand on my shoulder. Mom, it's okay. This happens. It's nothing to be ashamed of. I jerked away from him. I am not confused. I don't know why you're saying these things, but they're not true. Dr. Patterson held up his hand. Let's all take a breath. Anne, I'd like to do a cognitive assessment. That's just a simple test to check your memory and thinking. Would that be okay? Fine, I said. Do whatever you need to do. He asked me questions, what year it was, who the president was, what I had for breakfast. He asked me to count backwards from 100 by sevens. He asked me to draw a clock showing 10 minutes past 11. I did everything perfectly. He seemed puzzled. Anne, your cognition seems fine to me, he said slowly. But Denise has been calling the office regularly with concerns. What? I interrupted. Calling regularly? He nodded. Yes, over the past year and a half, we've received probably 15 or 16 calls from her, reporting various incidents. I turned to Denise, my hands trembling. Why would you do that? She looked at me with what seemed like genuine sympathy, but I could see the calculation behind her eyes. Anne, I know this is hard to hear, but you're not seeing how bad things have gotten. Michael and I have been documenting everything because we love you and we're worried. Documenting, I repeated. The word felt like ice water down my spine. Michael pulled out a folder, a thick folder, and handed it to Dr. Patterson. We've been keeping notes, dates, times, incidents. We think Mom needs professional care, and we wanted to present all the evidence so you could make an informed recommendation. I watched Dr. Patterson flip through the pages. My son and daughter-in-law had created an entire dossier against me, a chronicle of lies designed to make me look incompetent. This was the moment I understood. This wasn't concern. This was a plan. They wanted my house. They wanted me out of the way. And they were willing to destroy my reputation, my dignity, and my independence to get it. Dr. Patterson closed the folder and took off his glasses. I need to review all of this carefully. Anne, I'll be honest, some of these incidents, if true, would be concerning. But you're performing well on every test I give you. I'm not comfortable making any recommendations today. Denise's face tightened. Doctor, with all due respect, she's good at hiding it. That's part of the disease. She can seem fine in a controlled environment like this, but at home. I am sitting right here, I said loudly, my voice finally finding its strength. Stop talking about me like I'm not in the room. Stop lying about me. I know what you're doing. Michael stood up. Mom, you're getting upset. This is exactly what we're talking about. You're not thinking clearly. I am thinking perfectly clearly, I said, standing up too. My legs were shaking, but I refused to sit back down. And I'm leaving. Dr. Patterson, I'll call your office to schedule my next appointment. Alone. I walked out of that room with my head high, even though inside I felt like I was breaking into 1,000 pieces. I drove home, perfectly, safely, with complete awareness, and sat in my living room as the afternoon light came through the windows. I thought about that little boy who'd offered me his bike money. I thought about the man he'd become, sitting in a doctor's office with a folder full of lies about his own mother. And I cried. But then something shifted. I remembered something my own mother used to say. Baby, when they try to bury you, they don't know you're a seed. I stopped crying. I dried my face, and I made a decision. I was not going to let them do this to me. I was not going to be erased from my own life. If they wanted a fight, I would give them one. But I had to be smart. I had to move carefully. Because I was 73 years old, and the world was all too ready to believe I was the confused one. But I still had my wits, my will, and my right to protect what was mine. The first thing I did was call Patricia in Atlanta. I told her everything. The doctor's appointment, the folder of lies, Denise's phone calls over 18 months. Patricia was furious. Mama, that's elder abuse. That's literal abuse. We need to do something. I know, baby, but I need to be careful. If I react too emotionally, they'll use it as more evidence that I'm unstable. Patricia was quiet for a moment. What do you need from me? I need you to be my witness. I need you to document everything I tell you, write it down with dates, and I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing. I trust you, Mama. I've always trusted you. That phone call gave me strength. At least one of my children still saw me as I really was. Next, I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. I found an elder law attorney named Margaret Chen who specialized in cases of financial exploitation and something called guardianship abuse. Guardianship, that's when a court says you can't make your own decisions anymore and gives someone else control over your money, your home, even where you live. It's supposed to protect vulnerable people, but sometimes families use it to steal from their own parents. I told Margaret everything. She listened carefully, taking notes, her face growing more serious with every detail. Mrs. Williams, she said when I finished, what your son and daughter-in-law are doing is called planning for guardianship. They're building a case to have you declared incompetent so they can take control of your assets and your living situation. My stomach turned. Can they do that? They can try, she said, and unfortunately, with a thick enough file and the right doctor, sometimes it works. But you have advantages. You're clearly competent. You've been managing your own affairs. And now you're aware of what they're doing, which means we can fight back. What do I do? Margaret laid out a plan, step by step, in words I could understand. First, I needed my own medical evaluation from a geriatric specialist. That's a doctor who focuses on older people's health. Someone with no connection to Dr. Patterson or my family. Second, I needed to secure my legal documents. Things like my will, which says who gets what after I die, and my power of attorney, which names who can make decisions for me if I ever can't make them myself. I needed to make sure Michael and Denise had no access to these. Third, I needed to document everything they did from this point forward. Write it all down. Save every text message and voicemail. And fourth, I needed to consider what I wanted the end goal to be. "Do you want to maintain a relationship with your son?" she asked gently. I thought about Michael. My serious little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard. The teenager who hugged me tight after Robert died and promised he'd take care of me. The man who now sat in a doctor's office lying about me so he could take my home. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Right now, I just want to protect myself." Then that's what we'll do. I paid Margaret a retainer. $3,000 from my savings, money I had been careful with for years, but this was worth every penny. What Michael and Denise didn't know was that I'd learned how to fight from a lifetime of surviving, and I was just getting started. Over the next 2 weeks, I moved quietly but decisively. I went to a geriatric psychiatrist Dr. Chen recommended, a woman named Dr. Susan Park. She did a comprehensive evaluation, hours of testing, interviews, memory exercises, problem-solving tasks. At the end, she wrote a detailed report stating that I showed no signs of dementia, no cognitive impairment, and no reason I couldn't continue living independently. She even noted that my mental sharpness was above average for my age group. I got copies of my medical records from Dr. Patterson's office. It cost me $40, but it was worth it. Reading through Denise's phone calls, documented one after another, made me sick. She had been so systematic, so deliberate. Every few weeks, another call, another lie, building her case brick by brick. October 12th, Anne left the stove on and nearly caused a fire. November 3rd, Anne got lost driving home from the grocery store. December 3rd, Anne forgot to pay her electric bill and the power was almost shut off. January 15th, Anne called me at 2 a.m., confused about what time it was. On and on. 16 calls in 18 months. None of it true. I went to my bank and made sure all my accounts were secure. I changed my PIN, not because I'd forgotten it, but because I didn't trust what Michael and Denise might try to do. I made sure my Social Security and Robert's pension were deposited automatically, and that all my bills were paid online. This created a clear digital trail, proof that I was managing my money perfectly. I installed a camera system in my house. Small cameras in the living room, kitchen, and front porch. If they tried to claim I did something dangerous or confused, I'd have video proof of the truth. And then I did something that hurt my heart but had to be done. I updated my will and my power of attorney. I removed Michael entirely and named Patricia as my primary agent and David as secondary. I also added a specific clause that if anyone attempted to challenge my competency or force me into a care facility against my will, they would be immediately disinherited, meaning they'd get nothing when I died. Margaret reviewed everything and nodded approvingly. "You're building a fortress, Mrs. Williams." But then, I discovered something that changed everything, something that made me realize just how deep their greed went. I was going through some old paperwork in Robert's desk, something I'd been putting off for years, and I found a life insurance policy I didn't know about. A small policy, maybe $50,000, that Robert had taken out years ago and apparently forgotten to mention. The beneficiary was listed as me, but there was a secondary beneficiary, Michael. I sat there holding that paper, and suddenly everything made sense. This wasn't just about getting me out of my house so they could move in or sell it. This was about money, about inheritance, about them seeing me as an asset to be managed rather than a person to be loved. If I died, Michael would get $50,000. But if I went into a nursing home first, those places cost $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month. My savings would drain away fast. The house would have to be sold to pay for it. And who would control all that money while I was locked away in memory care, unable to speak for myself? Michael. As my son, he could petition for guardianship, claim I was incompetent, and take control of everything. They weren't just trying to warehouse me. They were trying to drain me dry. I called the insurance company that same day and changed the beneficiary to Patricia. By late April, I was ready. I had my legal protections in place. I had my medical documentation. I had my evidence. And I had something else, a clear, burning anger that had replaced the fear. But I also had sadness, because somewhere deep inside, I still remembered that little boy with the piggy bank. I called Michael and told him I wanted to have a family meeting. I said I'd been thinking about what they'd said at the doctor's office, and I wanted to discuss the future. I asked him to bring Denise and to come on Sunday afternoon. I didn't tell him that Margaret Chen would be there too, or that Patricia was flying in from Atlanta, or that I had printed out every single lie Denise had told Dr. Patterson, along with evidence proving each one was false. Sunday came. I made iced tea like I always did, set out cookies like I always did, but my hands weren't shaking anymore. I felt calm, resolved, ready. Michael and Denise arrived at 2:00. They walked in smiling, clearly thinking they were about to win, that I was going to surrender, that I'd finally agree to let them help me. "Mom, you look good," Michael said, kissing my cheek. For just a second, his smile was genuine, and I saw my son again. "Thank you, baby. Come sit down. We have a lot to talk about." They settled on the couch. Denise immediately started looking around the room like she was already planning how to redecorate. "Before we start," I said, "I've invited a couple other people to join us." "I hope you don't mind." Michael frowned. "Who?" The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia standing there, and right behind her, Margaret Chen carrying a briefcase. Michael stood up quickly. "What is this?" "Sit down, Michael," I said firmly. "We're going to have an honest conversation, and you're going to listen." Patricia hugged me tight and sat in Robert's old chair. Margaret took the chair by the window, setting her briefcase on the floor. Denise's face had gone pale. "Anne, who is this woman?" "This is Margaret Chen. She's my attorney." "Your attorney?" Michael's voice cracked. "Why do you need an attorney?" I sat down across from them, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Because my son and daughter-in-law have been trying to have me declared incompetent so they can take control of my life, and I'm not going to let that happen." Denise laughed nervously, but it sounded hollow. "Anne, that's not, we would never." "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't lie to me anymore. I know everything." Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder, much thicker than the one Michael had brought to Dr. Patterson. Mrs. Williams has asked me to present some facts, Margaret said, her voice professional and calm. Over the past 18 months, Mrs. Denise Williams has made 16 documented phone calls to Dr. Patterson's office, reporting various incidents of confusion and unsafe behavior by Mrs. Ann Williams. We have copies of each call log. She laid out the papers on the coffee table, one by one. Michael and Denise stared at them. In each case, Margaret continued, we have evidence that the reported incident never occurred. Denise's mouth opened, but no sound came out. On November 3rd, Margaret went on, Denise reported that Anne got lost driving to the grocery store and had to call for help. However, Anne's cell phone records show no outgoing calls that day. Her GPS history shows she drove directly to and from Piggly Wiggly without any stops or deviations. She pulled out more papers. On December 3rd, Denise reported that Anne forgot to pay her electric bill and nearly had her power shut off. But Anne's bank records show automatic payments have been set up for 7 years, and Alabama Power has no record of any missed payments or disconnection notices. Michael found his voice. Mom, I don't understand. Denise told me these things happened. She was worried. She was lying, I said. The words came out strong and clear. Every single thing she told you, every incident she reported to my doctor, was a lie. She was building a case to have me declared incompetent. That's insane, Denise said, but her voice cracked. Why would I do that? For my house, I said simply, for my money, for my life insurance, because you saw an aging woman living alone and you thought you could take advantage of her. Patricia spoke up, her voice sharp with anger. Denise, you didn't know Mama had a daughter who talks to her every single week? You didn't know she has neighbors who check on her every day? You didn't know she's smarter than you'll ever be. Denise turned to Michael, desperation in her eyes. Are you going to let them talk to me like this? Michael looked torn, confused, like a man watching his world crack apart. Denise, did you make those things up? Of course not. Your mother is confused. She's imagining. I am not confused. My voice filled the room, and I stood up. I have never been confused. I had a complete psychiatric evaluation done by Dr. Susan Park 2 weeks ago. She's a specialist in geriatric medicine. That means she's an expert in older people's health. She tested me for hours. Memory tests, problem solving, everything. And you know what she found? Nothing. No dementia, no cognitive impairment. Nothing. I am completely competent to manage my own life. Margaret handed Michael a copy of Dr. Park's report. Read it. It's all there. He did, his face going pale as he scanned the pages. His hands were shaking. There's more, I said. I had my lawyer review my medical records, my financial records, everything. I've been managing my money perfectly. Every bill paid on time for years. My house is maintained, I drive safely, I cook, clean, garden, and manage my own health care. There is absolutely no reason for anyone to take control of my life except greed. Denise stood up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this. Michael, we're leaving. Sit down, I said coldly. I'm not finished. Something in my voice, maybe the steel that comes from 73 years of surviving, made her sit back down. I've changed my will, I continued. I've changed my power of attorney. That's the document that says who makes decisions for me if I ever can't make them myself. I've changed the beneficiaries on my life insurance. Michael, you are no longer listed on any of my legal documents. Michael looked like I'd slapped him. Mom, you can't. I can, And I did. Patricia is now my power of attorney and will make decisions for me if I ever truly can't make them myself. David is secondary. My legs were shaking, but I refused to sit back down. And I'm leaving. Dr. Patterson, I'll call your office to schedule my next appointment. Alone. I walked out of that room with my head high, even though inside I felt like I was breaking into 1,000 pieces. I drove home, perfectly, safely, with complete awareness, and sat in my living room as the afternoon light came through the windows. I thought about that little boy who'd offered me his bike money. I thought about the man he'd become, sitting in a doctor's office with a folder full of lies about his own mother. And I cried. But then something shifted. Both are serious, and both can have legal consequences. Denise's face turned red. Elder abuse. I was trying to help. No, I said. You were trying to help yourself to my home, to my money, to my life. Michael put his head in his hands. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know she was lying. She told me you were declining, and I believed her. I thought we were helping you. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted to think my son had been manipulated, that he was innocent in all this. But he had sat in that doctor's office and presented a folder full of lies. He had pressured me to give up my home. He had looked at me with pity instead of respect. Michael, I said softly, you stopped seeing me as your mother. You started seeing me as a problem to be solved. Even if Denise lied to you, you believed her lies too easily. You were too willing to think I was incompetent, and that tells me something about what you really think of me. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, baby. I learned that when your father died, and I had to figure out how to keep going alone. But I did keep going. I've been keeping going just fine, and I'll continue to keep going without you treating me like I'm already gone. I paused, remembering something. Do you remember when you were 6 years old and you tried to give me your bike money to help with the electric bill? Michael looked up, his eyes red. Yes. That little boy wanted to protect his mama. He wanted to help carry the weight. But somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as someone to protect and started seeing me as a burden to manage. I don't know when that happened, but it breaks my heart. Mom. Denise stood up again, and this time Michael stood with her. This is ridiculous, Denise said, her voice shaking with anger. You're being manipulated by your daughter and this lawyer. Michael, your mother clearly isn't thinking straight. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of my house now, and don't come back unless I invite you. Michael looked devastated. Mom, please, let's talk about this. I made mistakes, but I'm your son. And I'm your mother, the mother who raised you alone after your father died, the mother who worked double shifts so you could have school clothes and Christmas presents, the mother who gave you $5,000 for your house and $2,000 for Kayla's braces. And you repaid me by trying to take away my home and my freedom? I walked to the door and opened it. Leave. They left. Denise was furious, muttering under her breath about ungrateful old women. Michael looked back once, his eyes wet with tears, but I didn't soften. I couldn't. Not yet. When the door closed behind them, I sat down heavily. Patricia came and knelt beside me, putting her head in my lap like she used to when she was little. You did it, Mama, she whispered. You were so strong. I stroked her hair and let myself cry. Margaret packed up her briefcase. Mrs. Williams, you should know that they may try to challenge this. They may try to file for guardianship anyway, but with your documentation, it would be nearly impossible for them to win. What do I do if they try? You call me immediately. And you keep living your life exactly as you have been, competently, independently, and on your own terms. Over the next several months, I did exactly that. Michael tried calling several times. I didn't answer. He sent letters that I read but didn't respond to. In one, he claimed he hadn't known the full extent of what Denise was doing. In another, he begged me to reconsider cutting him out of my life. But he never actually apologized for believing I was incompetent. He never acknowledged that he should have trusted me, his own mother, over lies. Denise, on the other hand, escalated. She tried calling Dr. Patterson again, but Margaret had already sent him the cease and desist letter, and he refused to take her calls. She tried talking to my neighbors, but the Hendersons and the Washingtons knew me well and told her to leave me alone. She even tried to report me to Adult Protective Services, a government agency that investigates when someone says an older person is being abused or neglected. She claimed I was a vulnerable adult being exploited by Patricia. APS did come to my house. A kind social worker named James sat with me for 2 hours. He reviewed all my documentation, met Margaret, looked at my home, talked to my neighbors, and concluded that I was not being exploited. I was being protected. He made a note in my file that any future reports about me should be investigated carefully for signs of malicious reporting. That means someone making false reports on purpose to cause harm. That was when Denise finally gave up. I heard through Patricia, who heard from Michael, that their marriage was struggling. Michael was angry at Denise for lying to him about my condition. Denise was angry at Michael for letting me cut them out. They had been counting on moving into my house or selling it to fund some business venture Michael wanted to start. Now that money was gone, and their financial stress was showing cracks in everything else. I didn't feel sorry for them. Maybe that makes me hard, but I'd earned my hardness. Patricia visited often, flying in from Atlanta once a month. We'd cook together, work in the garden, drive out to the lake. It was healing. David came home on leave and stayed with me for 2 weeks. We painted the guest room together, fixed the loose board on the porch, and planted tomatoes in the backyard. He never questioned my competence. He just loved me. I joined a senior center near my church and made new friends. We played cards, took day trips to Savannah and Charleston, and shared our stories. I met other women who'd been through similar situations, adult children trying to take control, families treating them like burdens. We supported each other. We reminded each other that we had value, that we had rights, that our age was not a weakness. I took up painting. I'd always wanted to try, and I figured at 73, why wait? I wasn't very good at first, but I enjoyed it. I painted magnolia blossoms and Sunday sunsets and Patricia Smile. I traveled a little. Patricia and I went to Charleston for a long weekend and ate shrimp and grits on a restaurant porch overlooking the water. David and I visited the Civil Rights Museum in Montgomery, walking through the history of our people's struggle and triumph. I felt free in a way I hadn't felt in years. But the biggest thing I did was reach out to other older women in my community who were facing similar battles. Through my lawyer and the senior center, I started a small support group. We met twice a month in the church fellowship hall, and we talked about our rights, our fears, and our strategies for protecting ourselves. I shared everything I'd learned: how to document incidents, how to find a good elder law attorney, how to secure your legal documents. Margaret came to speak to us about legal protections like powers of attorney and living wills. Dr. Park did a presentation on how to document your own cognitive health and what to do if someone falsely claims you're incompetent. We called ourselves the Dignity Circle, and within a year we had 30 members. 30 women who refused to be silenced or sidelined just because they'd gotten older. Some of them were dealing with children who wanted their houses. Others had grandchildren stealing from their purses or spouses trying to control their money. One woman's son-in-law was trying to have her declare incompetent so he could cash out her retirement fund. We helped each other. We shared lawyers' names and doctors' names. We practiced what to say when family members tried to gaslight us. That's when someone tries to make you doubt your own reality by insisting your memories or perceptions are wrong. We reminded each other that we were not crazy, not confused, not burdens. We were survivors, warriors, women who'd raised families and worked jobs and held communities together through decades of challenge. And we deserved respect. On the 1-year anniversary of that terrible doctor's appointment, I had a gathering at my house. Patricia flew in. David drove up from Texas with his new girlfriend, a sweet woman named Angela, who called me Miss Ann and helped me set out food. The Hendersons and the Washingtons came, so did Margaret Chen, who'd become not just my lawyer, but my friend. Dr. Park came too, and 12 women from the Dignity Circle. We filled my living room and spilled out onto the porch. We ate potato salad and fried chicken and peach cobbler. We told stories and laughed until our sides hurt. I looked around at all these people who saw me, who respected me, who celebrated my strength, and I felt wealthy beyond measure. Michael sent a card that day. Inside, in his careful handwriting, it said, "Mom, I miss you. I'm sorry for not believing in you. Please let me try again." I held that card for a long time, sitting in Robert's old chair as the evening light came through the windows. Part of me wanted to throw it away. Part of me wanted to call him right then and say, "Yes, come back, be my son again." But I wasn't ready. Maybe I would be someday. Maybe I could forgive him for believing I was incompetent more easily than he believed in me. Maybe we could rebuild something. Not what we had before, that was gone, but something new, built on honest respect instead of assumptions. But it would be on my terms, in my time, when I was ready. Because I had learned something crucial in that doctor's office, and in all the months that followed. My kindness was valuable, but it had to have boundaries. My love was powerful, but it couldn't be allowed to destroy me. And my age, this number that Denise and Michael had tried to use as a weapon against me, was actually my strength. I had 73 years of wisdom, 73 years of survival, 73 years of learning how to stand up after being knocked down, 73 years of knowing who I was and what I deserved. They thought my age made me weak. They thought I'd be easy to control, easy to convince, easy to put away. They were wrong. I put Michael's card in my Bible and went back out to the porch where my people were gathered. Patricia was showing Angela photos on her phone. David was helping Mrs. Henderson with her plate. Margaret was deep in conversation with 2 women from the Dignity Circle about their upcoming court cases. This was my family now, chosen and earned, built on respect and truth, and I was standing in my own home, on my own terms, exactly where I belonged. If you're an older woman listening to my story right now, maybe sitting alone in your house, maybe feeling afraid or dismissed or small, I need you to hear this. You are not confused just because someone says you are. You are not a burden just because someone treats you like one. You are not losing your mind just because someone claims you're forgetting things. Your age is not a weakness. Every year you've lived has taught you something important. You are wiser now than you've ever been. If someone in your family is pressuring you about your home, your money, your independence, pause. Ask yourself why. Get your own lawyer if you can afford it. Get your own doctor's evaluation. Write everything down. Save every text message. You have the right to live in your own home as long as you're able. You have the right to manage your own money as long as you're competent. You have the right to be treated with respect by the people you raised and sacrificed for. And if they can't give you that respect, you have the right to protect yourself from them, even if it hurts, even if they're your children, even if it means walking through fire to reach the other side. We spent our whole lives taking care of others. Now it's our turn to be honored, to be trusted, to be left in peace in the homes we built and the lives we've earned. Don't let anyone use your age to take away your dignity. Not your children, not your in-laws, not anyone. You deserve better. You've always deserved better. And you are not alone. There are thousands of us out there, standing in our own homes, protecting our own rights, refusing to be silent. Stand strong, my dear. Your life is yours. Don't let anyone steal it from you.